Hi, welcome to the Three Times podcast. In this episode, I travel as far north as I can go in Northumberland without falling off the edge to talk to Kimball, one of a small number of people in the county who make and fettle the Northumbrian pipes, and who is no mean player himself. There are three parts to this episode. In the first, Kim talks about the history of the pipes and how the different styles of playing have evolved. In the second, he describes the intricacies of making a set of pipes from the raw materials. And if you wonder how someone who ranked among the country's foremost instructors of canoeing and kayaking has now become one of its leading pipe makers, then listen to part 3. You can find out more about the pipes from Kim's website, which is listed in the show notes, where you can also find information about the tunes that Kim plays in the podcast. This is part 3.
Can you tell me where you are musically at the moment? How would you summarise your current musical activities?
There's two strands to it really. There's playing music. So I've had an interest in music since I was young, so really young, and that sort of changed and chopped all over the place. Not singing so much, but playing different instruments. So currently I'm playing with various sort of local little groups, and it's sort of traditional music. So what you might call KD music, traditional Northumbrian music in particular. So I play the concertina because that's really good in those types of scenarios. And there are some various little Northumbrian piping meetups rather than groups that happen from time to time. And I get involved with those, so that's really nice. But most of my playing's done at home, just for myself. So I've never sort of thought of myself as a performer. So I tend not to go out and seek performing opportunities. But I'm more than happy just to sit at home and while away the hours just playing, and really love it from that point of view. But the other strand that comes from being a Northumbrian piper is that sort of developed into making Northumbrian pipes as well, and that was really as a sort of an evolution from Northumbrian pipes being quite a high maintenance instrument. So they're not like a piano where you just open the lid, press a key and you get a note. It's the type of instrument that you have to sort of nurture and care for, and there's quite a lot of maintenance involved just to keep them working.
A bit like a pet.
A bit like a pet, that's right, yeah. So that developed into not just the initially sort of just basic fettling and maintenance, but as I sort of picked up more and more skills, being able to start making sets. So I now make Northumbrian pipes as well, just playing them for fun.
Well, I know you from many years back as one of the country's top instructors in canoeing and sea kayaking and river kayaking and paddle boarding.
Yes.
So, but all this time you kept your musical side hidden, didn't you? How did you come to be such an accomplished musician?
Well, yeah, I mean, you say accomplished musician,
yes, because that sounds like quite a canon of work there.
It does, doesn't it? Okay. So I suppose I went through the things that most people did from my generation as a child. So, I went to a small, well, for a rural child, I suppose, went to a small village school, infant school, primary school, where you had an assembly every morning and used to sing a hymn at the assembly. We were a church-going family when I was very young, so I got signed up to join the church choir when I was about 5 or 6 or something like that. And again, it was nothing serious. It was just, that the children of the village just went and did that. My mum was a piano player, and she'd learnt when she was a child. So she was keen. So we had a piano in the house, and she was keen for us to learn. So there was a piano teacher in the village, and we used to go for piano lessons once a week after school, and used to play the recorder. So all the usual stuff, I suppose, that kids of that generation do.
Chime bars? Did you do chime bars?
Never did chime bars.
That was the peak of my music career at school, the chime bar. Yeah.
But I actually quite like playing the recorder, not so much the piano. I think it was because of the formality of it and the choices of music that we were given to learn. So once you get past the peas pudding hot, peas pudding cold stage, then you're into sort of minuets and basic sort of classical type stuff. That seems to be the line that most music teachers take you down. And I do remember sitting in the front room having to do my piano practice on lovely summer's days, looking out the window. That usual story, thinking I'd much prefer to be outside. So piano lessons didn't last for more than a good, they seemed like a long time when I was that young. But regardless, all of that gave me quite a good musical basis at probably the right age, which meant that as I got older, when I was interested in different things, I had that background that I could draw on, and was able to apply. So I can read music slowly. Never sort of got past about the 6 or 7 year old standard of reading music. Right. And
many of us aspire to that level.
But no, I can't sight read a brand new tune and play it at the right speed, unless it's a waltz or something like that, a nice slow tune. So did most of my learning of music sort of by picking up tunes by ear. I think because you sing in a choir, we didn't have music to read. You just had to be able to sing the hymns. So therefore, you learn the tunes by listening to them. And again, that's a different skill set. Learning tunes by ear as to learning tunes by notes. And that's the side that I used more. So that's where my skill sort of lay. And then I didn't do much as a teenager. And then went away to university and became a student, and in that type of environment lots of guitars lying around in people's rooms and things like that. So started to learn to play the guitar as a student when I was about 18, and again just picked up stuff by ear, and learnt basic guitar notation. So it was all sort of chordal and finger picking, and I quite like just sitting and learning chords. That's how I started. I was taught some basic chords, and again it wasn't formally done. It was just you ask someone to show you some stuff and they would show you some chord shapes and you practice those. But then I found that I could use the chord shape and be able to finger pick out a melody over the top of the chord. So I quite like that way of playing.
So what era are we talking here? Is this in the 80s?
This is the 80s, yeah.
So you would be playing what, some of the singer-songwriter stuff from the 70s?
Well, yes. I mean, again, as a sort of a teenager, you have your favourite type of music you listen to, and I was a big Queen fan.
Oh, right.
So I sort of picked up, I bought the Queen tune book and things like that, because it was great in those days. You could get anything for a guitar in a book form, and that was where I used to get stuff from. So I used to sort of finger pick out Queen melodies and stuff like that, not from their popular greatest hits type stuff, but if you listen to some of their albums, I just love that type of stuff. So so played the guitar, and then again just used to sat at home and noodle around and things like that. And then I must have been in my mid-20s, and sort of heard for the first time the Northumbrian pipes. And I can't remember my first time I did hear them. It may even have been a TV programme. I think it might have been, actually, because there was a maker called David Burley, and he had a little shop a workshop in Long Framlington. And it was quite strange, because most makers hide away in a workshop, a shed at the bottom of the garden, but he had a proper shop in the village with a proper shop front. And so they did it might have been one of these magazine programs where there's a little article piece on him, and so I thought, right, well that's something to pursue. So that was the idea. And then I got married, and my wife Linda said, well, you'll be buying wedding rings and things like that. And I've never been one for jewellery, and especially rings and things and that. So I thought, well, no, I'll have a set of Northumbrian pipes, please.
I'll wear them at the wedding.
That's right. Yeah. So that's how it came about, really. So having never played them, never seen them live close up before, but always fancied it. Fancied it for a couple of years by then. Thought, right, well, that'd be something to do. And actually, there was probably something that led up to that a little bit more. So you mentioned the canoeing and the kayaking. So you used to go away on trips, camping trips and things like that, and you'd go sea kayaking and camp away, go canoeing and camp away, and that's usually resulted in quite a lot of downtime as well. So you'd canoe or kayak all day. You'd get to where you were going to camp. You'd pull up on a beach somewhere or on the riverside. You'd establish your camp, get set up, and then you had quite a lot of time, until you went to bed. And it would get dark early if you're doing this in the winter, and you'd be sitting around the campfire and things. And so I used to take along a little penny whistle and just play some tunes, because it just helps pass the time. Keeps the bears away, that type of thing. So that was quite nice, and obviously that lends itself to a certain genre of music. And when we did a lot of the canoeing and kayaking up in Scotland as well, and we used to seek out, when we used to often do things like we'd drive up, and then we'd be near a little village for the first night. We'd then go on a little trip, then we'd be back at the village at the end of the trip and stay over. And so we used to go to the pub for meals and things like that on those first and last nights, and often there'd be traditional music and playing in those. So that's where I suppose that sort of line of music was sparked from. But I hadn't really heard of Northumbrian music till then. It was all Scottish style. So that sort of penny whistle and getting involved with traditional music a little bit on these types of trips was always good fun. But then so then got my set of Northumbrian pipes as a wedding present. My mum, I said she was a pianist. She played when she was young, and then she picked it up again as an adult, and she worked through her music grades. So she'd been playing at home all the time when I was a teenager, and she started to write tunes as well. So she actually wrote and not, well, she offered. She didn't just tell us, but she wrote a wedding march, And she said, Kim, there's a wedding march here, so I've written it for you if you'd like to use it on your wedding. And she played it, and it sounded great. So we actually asked the Northumbrian piper to play it for us on our wedding. So there was a wedding march that was written by my mum and played by a Northumbrian piper for our wedding. So that was probably my first live performance, a hearing of Northumbrian pipes, and then I had a set. So that was great, and it's nicely engraved. Kim and on the day of Kim and Linda's wedding, it's got the date on it, so I can always remember when the anniversary is. That's quite handy. So I remember we went to pick them up from David Burley's workshop because we asked him to make them for us, and so he made them for us, and it took a few months to get them made, and then we got the phone call to they're ready, come and get them. So we went to come and get them, and he said, there you go. So that's it. And he says, are you going to have a go then? I don't know what I'm doing. So I said, not really. Can you show us? So he played a couple of tunes of them, and they sounded great. And then he said, right, so how are you going to learn? And I said, I don't really know. I haven't thought about that. Can you recommend a teacher? So he jotted down the name of somebody, and he said, this guy's a really good teacher. He's got an ancestry going back, a historical sort of if you go back through the lineage of who taught him and who taught that person, it goes back all the way. So in terms of playing in the traditional style, he's probably one of the better people. So he gave me this guy's name and a phone call, and it was a lovely old gentleman called Roland Lofthouse, who sadly passed away about a year ago, and he lived in Brighton. And I was living in Wickham in Newcastle at the time, so Brighton was just down the road. So I rang him up and just said, David Burley said that I could get in touch with you about some lessons. And he said, I've already got some students. I've already got 2 people I'm teaching. So I said, okay. Is there anyone else you'd recommend? And we just got chatting on the phone, and he must have come round and thought by the end of the conversation, I sounded like I was probably more than a passing phase. So he said, well, I'll tell you what then. He said, tell you what, come down on Thursday and we'll see what we can do. So I went along to his house on Thursday, and we sat around and drank tea for half an hour or so. And then he said, right, so what can you do? And that was a couple of months after our wedding. So I'd already started to learn some basics, and I was keen not to develop any bad habits. But the Northumbrian pipes is the type of, again, an instrument, like I said earlier, you can't just raise the lid of a piano and press a key and get a note. You've got to develop the technique to make a nice sound in the first place. And there's an awful lot going on that you've got to balance, because the way the Northumbrian pipes work, I mean, people might be familiar with Highland pipes, and you see the Highland piper playing the chanter, which is the bit they hold in their hand and makes the notes. But they've got 3 great big drones that stick out above their shoulder, and they play a note as well. And each of the drones has got its own reed. The chanter's got its reed as well, and these reeds are made of cane. So Northumbrian pipes are quite similar to that, but they're a lot more delicate. And the margins of them being able to make music technically are probably closer together. It's a smaller bandwidth that you've got to operate within in terms of pressure and airflow, and everything has to be set up perfectly for them to work as well. So that means that you've got to learn to play the instrument to make a nice sound before you can actually start to learn to play tunes. So there's a lot of just, I suppose, spending 10 minutes at a time as a beginner, practicing getting the bag to have air flowing through it at the right pressure. And you need to be able to do that.
And how do you generate the pressure? Does that come from you breathing into, or do you have bellows?
So again, if you've got that picture of a Highland piper in your head, they've usually got a tube in their mouth. That's and they're filling their bag with air. Well, not for us Northumbrian pipers, no. So we want to make it more complex than that. So we have some bellows that are strapped on a waist belt that rides around just around our ribs, and the bellows sit under our right elbow, our right arm, and by squeezing those bellows against our side, our rib cage, we could close the bellows, and those bellows are connected by a tube into the bag, and that fills the bag. So you have to be able to evenly pump the bellows to supply air to the bag. Once the bag's full, then you have to be able to manage the air pressure within the bag and squeeze with your other elbow the air out of the bag, so it travels down the 3 drones that are playing and the chanter that creates the tune. So there's there's in terms of the motor skills and coordination that's required.
That's quite complicated.
That's quite complicated, and that's something that certainly you can't sort of overstate as being incredibly important to being able to play them well. So yes, that all has to be done. So I've been doing that type of practice for probably a few weeks by the time I went for my first lesson with Roland. And then Roland introduced me to some very basic tunes, and we used to sort of learn a tune in the evening, and he'd have the music there, but it was they were nice and slow tunes. And I went to see Roland about once a fortnight on Thursday nights for a few years, and it was great, and it was lovely, and it was that tradition in Northumberland where for learning music at the time is that although yes there were professional teachers and professional musicians, the old sort of way of teaching the next generation was just to do it because you loved doing it. So he wouldn't accept anything in return.
Really?
Yeah. So it's absolutely fantastic. Wow. So you go along and you spend a couple of hours and learn some tunes, and he loved doing it because he loved passing on to the next generation. And you could go along and learn. So it was fab.
Thanks for listening to the 3 Times podcast. Please subscribe and tell your friends about it.